Hi everyone. This is Gil Shear, and today in Kabbalah Explained Simply, we are going to be answering your questions about Kabbalah, about spirituality, anything you wanted to know about either of these two topics, about spiritual development, about the process of it, about Kabbalah, anything related to Kabbalah. Feel free to ask, and hopefully we'll give you the Kabbalistic answer. So let's get started. I already have a couple of questions and answers that I have from students that sent them in. So let's get started with those questions. And please feel free to add, and let's get going. So here is the question. It seems like things are going all wrong for me in life. I lost my job. I'm having problems in the family. I feel more isolated than ever before. What is happening to me, and is there a way to fix it? So first of all, I appreciate sharing this. Thank you for the question. Let's start from the end. Yes, there is a way to fix it, and I'll tell you exactly how. But before I explain how to fix it, we first need to understand what's going on here. So let's jump over to the board. Okay, so it sounds like you're going through one of those periods in life. We've all been through them. We all know what it's like, some more, some less. But basically, you are here, and it's like you're being hit by all kinds of things, right? So what did you say? You said something about your work, your job, and something about your family, that things aren't working out there, I think. And I'm sure, write in the chat, you guys, what else can go wrong in life? Right? Pretty much everything. Maybe a driver cut you off, or you even had a small accident, or not a small one. What else? Maybe something with friends. All kinds of things. There are so many things in life that can go wrong, right? Maybe it's something with the finances, with the money, with the bank. Pretty much what can go wrong might be going wrong. So first of all, in order to understand how to solve it, we need to understand what's happening here. So it seems like it's all these kinds of forces that are interacting with us, that we are in interaction with, and these forces are influencing us in a negative way, right? I mean, if you think about it, there's a certain picture of reality. There's us, and we're experiencing all of these things in a certain way. Now, what's really happening outside of us, we don't really know. Because, come to think of it, what we really are is we're simply a black box with 5 openings. That's all we are, right? These openings are our senses. That's how we interact with what's outside of reality. And what's really outside, we have no idea. We don't really know what's outside. We just know what goes through our senses, right? And then it paints this picture. An interaction, with any of these, and probably many, many more, right? With a bank, with a family, on the road, or with friends, or with your job, or anything, health issues, right? There's also health, of course. It's also a main thing. All of these things are basically me. This is me. And this is reality. Right? I don't know what it is. I only know how I feel it interacting with me. And according to my sensation, then things are not going that well. At least according to the question that was asked. For some others, it might be going great. Perfect. So what's really happening here? So the first thing you need to understand is that these are not many different forces. It's not your boss at work, and it's not your friends who are acting this way to you, or your family, and it's not the bank that is collecting whatever it needs to collect from you, or doing this or doing that, or the government, right, or a driver that cut you off. All of these things are simply a certain perception that's painted in your mind, actually. That's the only place where it's painted. Anything you experience, it's simply some kind of representation of, you can call it even some form of energy, I don't know, right? That's outside of you, and you interact with it, and then you have an experience which you call your life, your reality. But really, what in fact is happening here, you're only interacting with a single force. So all of these things are not many things. They are in fact only one thing. And they all come from this single thing. Now, what is this single thing? Well, it's been given many names over time. Some call it Havaya. Some call it Adonai, or we don't usually pronounce the name in full, so we say Adoshem, which basically is Yud K Vav K, right? You call it, some religions call it God or the Creator. In Kabbalah, we call it many times simply light, or all kinds of names that you've probably come across from childhood that they named this thing, even though a lot of these streams that name it don't really experience it. They just heard about it or read about it somewhere, and then they gave it this name. But really, there is only a single force in reality that is outside of you. And even though it seems like there are all kinds of forces, that's pretty much believing that there are many gods in a way, right? Because if there are many forces, then there are many gods. Like different methods, they say, okay, it's raining, so there's a god up there that is responsible for rain, and if there's thunder, there's a god of thunder, and there's a god of love, and there's a god of this and a god of that. Well, according to Kabbalah, there is only one God, one force outside of us. And that means that all of these things that we experience are actually that same force. Because if outside of me there is only this force, then there cannot be any other God, so to speak, right? So that driver that cut me off, or my boss that gave me a hard time or even fired me, are they their own independent forces? Think of it on a level of reality. If they're an independent force, then you can call them in a way a god, right? Like those different methods that we said, the god of rain, the god of thunder, etc. But in fact, there is only a single force that's activating everything. And that is the first thing you need to understand in order to solve not just one of these things, but all of them. Because if you're experiencing anything as negative, as bad, then it means that there is some form of, you could say it's like an illness, right? So let's say you have an illness and you have different symptoms of that illness. You might have a headache, maybe you're sweating, or you have fever, or you're shivering, or your muscles hurt, all these kinds of things. Now, you can treat the symptoms, and sometimes you should do that. Also, according to Kabbalah. So, if you have to solve something with your boss, solve it. If you need to solve something with your family, or any of these things, then you should do that. You should solve it. But you should also know that by doing that, you're only treating the symptom. And if you really want to get to the root of it, then you have to go for the core. You have to understand, where is this coming from? Okay, so that is the first thing you need to know. Now, if you understand that, then your next question would be, okay, fine. So let's say I understand that, and that all of these many things that I feel that are happening to me and they're negative, etc., I know they're coming from a single force. Okay, what now? So first of all, just identifying the source of all of this already begins to push you into balance with the entire system. Why? Because the purpose of this force is only one: to bring us to a state of ultimate fulfillment. Now you might be thinking, okay, but that's the exact opposite of what I'm feeling. So how could you say that this is a force that's bringing us to ultimate fulfillment, and in the same sentence say this is the force that's causing us all of the sufferings that we feel? So that's a valid question. And the answer is that the only reason you experience anything as negative, and I mean anything from the tiniest thing, if you lean on something and your hand slips, that's a certain form of negativity, right? It's me feeling something that I don't want to feel. So even from the smallest thing to the greatest thing, I don't know, think of something really intense that will happen to you, good or bad, by the way, then all of this comes from that force. So then your next question should be, okay, what does this force want from me? What is its purpose? And the answer to that is that it wants to bring you closer to it. It wants to bring you not only closer to it, but it wants to bring you complete fulfillment, pure light. And the only reason that you experience anything as the opposite of that is only because you are opposite. Okay? So think about that for a few seconds. The only reason you experience this positive, loving force as opposite is because you are opposite. And having this understanding, identifying everything that's happening around you, and the pain that it causes you, and beginning to relate it to the source that it comes from, is already half of the cure. Okay? So what's the other half of the cure? The other half of the cure is not only identifying where it comes from, but wanting to be connected to that state yourself. So above everything that you experience, wanting to connect to your perfected state. Because in fact, you exist up here in complete connection with this force, with all of the souls, with all of reality. You are already in a perfected state. And if you want to reconnect to that perfected state, so this should simply be a desire. That's it. If you aim your desire to connect to that perfect state, the response that you get is you already begin to come closer to it. So you get an immediate response, not through your job or friends or family or bank or driver or health in a way that awakens you to ask these questions, but you get it directly into your desire that wants to connect with that force. And the result of that is that you bring yourself into balance. Into balance with what? With the entire system of reality. So just a recap of this. Anything negative you experience is not isolated incidents driven by different forces. It is all a result of one single force. Now, this force is a force of absolute goodness. It's a force of perfection. And the only reason you experience it the opposite is because you are opposite. And how can we connect to that force? We need to desire it. That's it. Nothing else is expected from us other than desiring to connect to that force. And you can do that anywhere, anytime, any place, no matter what you're doing. You can do that now. And I'd like you to report back if you can, maybe next week, maybe the week after, or if some of you have already experienced states like this and you've tried to tackle the root cause of that, which is simply lack of connection to that force. That is the root cause of everything. And if you've done that and if you've connected to that force, I'd love to hear how that impacted you, how that made you feel, how that influenced even the specific incidents of your life. Now, I want to add one more thing about this. The kind of a side question that might come up from this is, okay, so do bad things happen to bad people? Is that why it's happening? Because I'm bad? Because I'm not connected? Because I'm not desiring it? The answer is absolutely not. The calculation of the souls is a very, very complex calculation, and it's related to all of our places in this system. Now, why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? Well, there isn't an easy answer to that other than the fact that if you hear that everything that happens to you, it comes from this single force, then it means that you already have the potential to correct it, to bring your entire life back into balance with it. So that was the first question, and I'm going to take a look in the chat to see if there are any follow-ups. Let's take a look. Okay. Kevin is asking, good to see you again, Kevin. Our inner changing states are the changes, right? Yes, your inner changing states are the changes, but there is also a reflection of your inner changes on the outside world. Because if everything you experience in the outside world is a reflection of your internality, and this is something that you can even explain on a material level, right? If you wear orange glasses, then you'll see everything as orange, you know, if that's the lens that you're looking at reality through. So if you turn on a radio and you tune it to a certain frequency, then that's the frequency it will connect to, and no other frequency. And it's the same with us. If our desires, if our inner state is in a certain frequency, then that's the frequency that we will experience. And if our internal frequency changes, then we won't suddenly have a positive spin on reality and say, oh great, everything is now good, you know, I got fired, but I'm happy about it. No, it's much deeper than that. You will experience a different reality. Okay. Maria is asking, so we can have direct impact from the divine force, say a dream. Yes, a dream, but I would say a dream is very confusing because a dream is your internal psychology painting a picture. It's a lot more direct than that, Maria. Everything you encounter, everything. You're walking your dog and you meet someone. You're driving on the road. Everything and everyone around you is an impact from that force. Okay, that's this. That's what it is. There's no job, and there's no friends, and there's no family, and there's no driver, and there's no bank, and there's no health. There is only me and the upper force. This force of ultimate connection, this force of ultimate love. And that is the only things that exist in reality. So who are all these other people? And what about by this? And how do they experience it? I know there's a lot of questions here, but this is what Kabbalists found. They found that there is only the will to receive that was created, that's you, and the light that created it. And that outside of you, there is only light, nothing else. Okay, think about that for a little bit. Let's take a look at some more questions. Okay. Okay, Martin is asking, hi Gil, how can we deal with our daily struggles now if it takes us some time to develop the sixth sense and attain spirituality? Good question, Martin. In fact, you don't need to develop your sixth sense in order to deal with your daily struggles and begin to impact it. Think of it like this. Let's say you're aiming to run a marathon, 42 kilometers, I think. So you're training and you're working out and you're running every day, and you start off with running 5K and then you go to 10K and 15K and 20K. Now, you still haven't reached your goal of 42 kilometers, but are you changing? Is your body changing? Is your inner metabolism changing? Of course, yes, yes, and yes, right? So it's the same in spirituality. It's not like a binary advancement that you have nothing and then you suddenly have everything. No. Every gram, every drop you invest into it, the system responds, because the system is a law. It's not, I called it before, God or creator. It's not the God and it's not the creator that we learnt about as kids, at least most of us, that like it's this cuddly, long-bearded guy usually up there who's looking down on us and telling us to behave. Not at all. It is simply a force, a law of nature. It's you could say in a way it's I don't want to say emotionless, because it's not, but emotions are things that we relate to humans. So that's what we usually do to this God. We give it human qualities. But in fact, it is a law of nature. And just like if you walk off a cliff, then gravity will make you fall, and you can't blame gravity. You can just say, okay, I didn't follow this law. It's the same in all of reality. There is a law of connection. And if you aim to follow that law, then the system responds immediately. Right now, Martin. You can change your reality right now. You don't have to wait for anything. Okay. Let's take a look at some more. Yes, Kevin wrote, none else besides him. That is correct. That's how Kabbalist Bala Sulam refers to this state. None else besides him, besides this force. Okay. Patricia is asking, are all 8 billion in that perfect state? Great question. The answer is yes. Everything and everyone is already in that perfect state, and are just waiting for you to open your eyes and discover that perfect state. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, so Maria is asking, what do you mean by we are already up there in the upper force? Okay, that's a good question. Let me break that down a little bit more. So we're down here, right? And let's call this state B, and let's call this state C. Where's state A? State A is here. So what are these 3 states? So we've spoken about 2 of them. State B is this state in this world where we interact with forces of reality, and we feel them as all kinds of different things, we're basically in a fragmented, in a broken picture of reality. Why broken? Because we experience it through a shattered piece. And that shattered piece is us. And each and every one of the 8 billion people hold that shattered piece. Now, where did this shattered piece come from? It came from a state of complete connection and perfection. Let's call that state A. In that state, the light and the kli is a vessel, K-L-I, vessel. They're in complete connection and perfection. And this state shattered. It's described in the Bible in the story of Adam and Eve, actually. Adam and Eve, again, we're taught as kids that it's this nice story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The snake convinced Eve, who convinced Adam to eat from the tree of knowledge, etc. It's not a kid story. The story of Adam and Eve is talking about the deepest state of trying to be in complete connection with this upper force and miscalculating an intention to bestow, and as a result of this miscalculation, the desire shattered. So it's as if this shattering occurred because of a mistake, but of course it wasn't a mistake. It was all part of the general plan of development. And what is the purpose of this breaking, of this shattering? The purpose of it is that so that we will be able to independently grow back and build that state of connection. So here in state A, we're like an embryo in the womb. We're completely nurtured. We have everything before we even can think about it or think of it or do anything about it. Everything is already there in complete fulfillment, and there's only one thing lacking there: our active participation. That is the only thing that's lacking in the first state, in state A. And that is why we're brought into this state, and that is why we experience all of these things that we experience with forces that seem that they are of this world. And the purpose of that is that so we can independently build this state of perfect connection ourselves and rise towards, again, that complete connection with the upper force. And when we do, in fact, we find that state C is already in existence. It's already there. But we are here in a dream. Yes, that's right. We're in a dream. And this dream is something we need to wake up from. And that's what Kabbalists describe awakening to this force. They call it awakening from a dream. Just like you wake up from a dream, the dream feels real, everything feels real, and you wake up and sometimes, if it's a bad dream, you're like, oh, thank God that didn't happen. And it feels real, and even it affects your body, actually. It feels that real that it impacts your body physically. Research even shows that you can, if you dream of doing physical exercise, then your muscles are like working out, even though you're not moving. So it's all in the mind, right? So we're exactly in that state, which is this world, and we need to wake up from it. So let's wake up. Okay, let's wake up and let's see what else you have to ask. This looks like theory U. Victor is saying, yep, there are a lot of theories today that describe a similar reality. In fact, this is not a theory. This is a description, a scientific description of Kabbalists that have developed this tool, that have risen to that state. Actually, thousands of years ago, they described this from thousands of years ago, this very state. And everything they describe from their experience. Okay. Okay, P. Marlin is saying, begging for help from above. I'm unable to correct any desire or state, completely helpless. I've been struggling and toiling on my own strength, for so I thought, but now I am lowering myself. Thank you for sharing that with us. First of all, the experience that you're describing is, it sounds like it's a certain form of awakening, because even a state of helplessness is good if you direct it towards the reason why you feel that, and it can bring you to exalted states, this cry. But I would recommend, if you're not in Kabbalah yet, Marlon, then I would recommend that you join Kabbalah, because in Kabbalah, for those of you who don't know, is our online learning platform. Rachel will probably post a link in the chat now if you want to check it out and try a 14-day free trial. And also, by the way, right after this session, in about 20 minutes, we're going to continue to a Kabbalah Zoom session where we meet weekly on Zoom to do this, basically, but more in person, and interact with each other and build a community together. And it sounds like that's what you need. You need to connect to an environment that wants to evolve spiritually, because connecting to an environment is like an amplifier of your desire. Each and every one of us have a tiny spark from that corrected state, and that's all we have, a tiny little point. And connecting to other people who have that same point, it amplifies everything that we have. So I would recommend checking that out if you haven't yet. What is the connection between Kabbalah and Freemasonry? How do they relate to each other? I'm not familiar in depth with Freemasonry. I can only say that there are many methods today that come from the wisdom of Kabbalah. And even philosophy itself, then German philosopher, can't remember his name, maybe one of you can post it, I'm sure you know, I've mentioned him a few times. Then he mentions how Pythagoras wrote that his teacher studied Kabbalah, and he named it philosophy. Let me see if I can quickly find that quote. Let's give it maybe 10 seconds. I think it's Johannes Reichlin. Yep, I think I got it. Yep, here it is. Let me even share my screen with you. Okay, so Johannes Reichlin wrote in De Arte Kabbalistica. He was a German humanist, political counselor, etc., and he wrote this. My teacher, Pythagoras, who is the father of philosophy, did nevertheless not receive those teachings from the Greeks, but rather he received them from the Jews. Therefore, he must be called a Kabbalist. And he himself was the first to convert the name Kabbalah, unknown to the Greeks, in the Greek name philosophy. Pythagoras' philosophy emanated from the infinite sea of Kabbalah. So, there you go. I don't know about Freemasonry, but I can tell you that many of these methods, their source is in fact the wisdom of Kabbalah. Okay, let's see what else. There's a question follow up on that. Are religions based on Kabbalah? Not all of the religions, but the Jewish religion is based on Kabbalah, and the Christian religion, which is based on the Jewish religion, is in that case also in a way based on Kabbalah, and Islam, which is also based on Judaism, then Also, its root is Kabbalah, and it is also written that Abraham gave wisdom to the East, so the Eastern methods as well. According to the Bible, their wisdom also came from the wisdom of Kabbalah, from the wisdom of Abraham, who was a Kabbalist. Okay. So Martin Pythagoras' theorem stems from Kabbalah. A squared plus B squared equals C squared has deep spiritual meaning. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Where are your questions? Are you there? Okay. Okay, Anita is asking, so are we living in a dream reality? Where is the balance in this lifetime? I'm not sure I understand your question, Anita, but balance, if I understand it correctly, to reach balance in this lifetime, then you need to be working with two forces. And naturally, we only work with one force. We work with a will to receive pleasure. And that is the single force we work with. All of humanity is working with that force. And this force alone is bringing the system out of balance. Not just on a personal level, but on all levels. On the level of all of humanity. The result of that is that nature always is pushing us back to equilibrium, right? It's pushing us back into balance. So, humanity is over-consuming, and not putting the priorities correctly. So nature creates a virus, corona, and that pushes all of the systems back into balance, because suddenly we can't travel, and we can't consume as much as we could before, and we got to stay home, and we've got to start questioning meaningful things, right? What am I doing with my life? Suddenly we have more time. And that's simply a response of nature pushing us back into balance. That's all it is. And this is also on a global level, but it's also on an individual level, Anita. So balance in this lifetime is working with two forces. The second force being the light. So connecting to the light is bringing balance into your life. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, another follow-up from Martin. But how, Gil? We need to change how we view events. It's not easy to 100% internalize that everything happens because it's meant to be. That's definitely not easy, Martin. I agree with you 100%. It's very difficult. And it will never be something that you just feel all the time, because part of spiritual development is constantly making that effort to return back to the state. So I would say this. Maybe we'll relate it to another question here. The question is, it was a question that was posted in advance. How do I know if I'm advancing in spirituality at all? And that's a valid question, because you want some kind of measuring device, right? You want to know, am I advancing or not? What's going on here? I'm putting in the effort. Tell me that I'm advancing, or let me feel it, or let me see it. So there are ways to know if you're advancing. Now, in order to see that you're advancing in spirituality, you need to see the frequency of your internal states. So does that mean that I need to be 24/7 every second of the day, like on a cloud, meditating and being with a big smile on my face and saying everything is so great? No. It does not mean that. That is not a measurement of advancing in spirituality. The measurement of advancing in spirituality is the frequency of which I go in and out of the right intention. In and out. So I could be in a certain state for days, and then I change states, and then if I begin to advance, then I will go through that entire state. I might go through it not in days, but in hours, and then in minutes, and in seconds even. And it's even said that in a single second, a Kabbalist can experience 400 different states in 1 second. So how do you know you're advancing in spirituality at all? If you plant yourself like a seed into an environment, mineral-rich soil, which is a spiritual environment, and from within that environment, the frequency of which your ins and outs begin to grow, that is a measurement of advancing into spirituality. So test yourself. And why was that related to Martin's question? Because you're right, you won't be able to 100% be immersed in a complete understanding and agreement that everything comes from that upper force. No, instead you'll forget about it and you'll curse your boss or that driver that cut you off, and then you'll remember where it comes from. And that will push you to connect to that force. And by doing so, it's like taking that pill, that medicine again, that's healing you, that's bringing you closer to it. Okay. What else do we have here? Let's see. Okay, I'm just seeing a lot of comments here. I'm not seeing so many questions. Maybe further down. Ruth, if you can post the questions, please. That would be better. Let's see. Debbie is adding, if you're drawn to this material, you're likely growing in spirituality. That's correct in a way, but it's not completely accurate, Debbie, and I'll explain why. Because there is a point in life that a person suddenly awakens, right? Spiritual awakening. There's actually a few steps in that process, and you can check out the Kabbalah Explained Simply session we did on that, the 5 life-changing steps of spiritual awakening. Maybe if, Ruth, if you can post that in the chat, that would be good. And within that process, what you have is a desire that changes its form. And why does it change its form? Because it goes from desiring bodily desires like food, sex, family, simple animal desires, to evolving to desiring social desires like money, power, and knowledge. And its final step of evolution is when it begins to be satiated from all of the previous desires that I mentioned, and it begins to be drawn to a spiritual level of evolution. And that is considered an awakening from above. So if you're here, if you feel that this material touches something inside of you, then that's great, and that means that you have this point awakened in you, and that was given to you like a gift. You didn't do anything for it, right? You didn't work for it. It just suddenly appeared. You just suddenly, woke up after a gradual process of actually not just years, of millions of years. And in that gradual process, what happened to you is that your desire ripened for its true purpose. And that awakening is actually an awakening from above. It is not yet anything that you have done. Now, once you get this desire, once you get this awakening from above, that means that you have the potential to grow spiritually. And then the ball is in your court. So then the question is, what are you doing with this awakening? So some people ride that wave for a little bit. They have that awakening, they try and fulfill it, and then they leave it alone. Other people feel that the potential of this awakening is infinite, you could say, in a way, and they plant themselves in an environment to nurture it, to grow that point. And that's probably the most practical thing. If you want to take a next step in advancing spiritually, then your next step is to join that environment, that Kabbu, our Kabbu platform. If you're still feeling that this environment is nurturing, and that may very well be the case, then that's fine too. Because here, right now, this is also an environment. I have almost 200 people that are watching this together, and thousands more that watch later on. And this is an environment too, because you're making time to watch this. You set a time in the calendar, you showed up, you invested effort. That's on you. That's your investment, right? This isn't from above. You invested this time and effort, and many of you did this together, and you're here now, and you're watching, and you're interacting in the chat. And it's not just, a YouTube video that you're watching something and scrolling over. This has the potential to be life-changing, regardless of what we're even talking about here. Regardless if I'm blabbering about this or blabbering about that. In fact, all of this is just to be grounds for a common intention. That's the purpose of these weekly sessions. So we do it through this topic and that topic, and we did this and we did that, but really that's all we're doing. We're creating an environment, you could say, a spiritual environment. So let's see. Okay, Rolly is asking, what's your take on African spirituality, a culture I understand are gifted in connecting with spirits? You can ask me about all kinds of methods, and my answer will always be the same. I'm not an expert in any of these methods. I'm an expert in the wisdom of Kabbalah. So I can only answer you about the wisdom of Kabbalah. So, sorry I can't help here, but this is Kabbalah explained simply. Let's see what else. Okay. Let's take one more question. Okay, question from Robert. When we die and return in another being, do we come back with a higher state of consciousness, or do we? So, Robert, thanks for your question. It's a good question. The answer is this. Your point in your heart is eternal, even if it hasn't awakened yet. In each person there is this potential, there is this piece of this shattered soul, and it's in everyone. Some have awakened with it, some have not yet. And when you die and return and reincarnate, when your physical body reincarnates, then Kabbalists call it changing a shirt. That's what they call it. And what's being inside is the soul. So as long as you've developed your soul, then all that happens is you're switching a shirt to your soul. So your soul, whatever you've achieved in one life, it's saved. The game is saved, right? So you have like this, the state of yours is kept. There is never retreat in spirituality. There is only ascent. And if you have not started developing your soul, then all you're doing is you're building up your desire's evolution towards awakening to that state. But if you're here and you're hearing this, then it means that potentially you will be able to complete your entire states, all of them, of your states of correction in your life. That's what Kabbalist Baal Sulam writes. He writes that in our generation, if a person hears about this potential, then that means that they have the potential to go through the entire spiritual correction while they are alive. So hopefully we'll all experience this spiritual awakening together and support each other in advancing to it. And I was very happy to be here and take your questions. And in a few minutes, I'll continue with the KabBU students on Zoom. So if you're in KabBU, I'll see you in a few minutes on Zoom, in 4 minutes to be precise. And if you want to join KabBU, then you're more than welcome to. We'll be happy to see you. You can check out a 14-day free trial in the links that Rachel will post in a second. And that's it for today. So thank you, Ruth and Rachel, for supporting the session, and thank you to all of you for bringing your desire, your collective desire. So I'm Gil Shear, and this was Kabbalah Explained Simply. Bye-bye.